there have not been any negotiations. It's more a passing of messages that's been going on through third parties. But do you think now the Iranians see this opportunity as a possibility to try and find a resolution?
Absolutely not. I think that in Iran, no one sees this even as a kind of an opportunity. I think that's not even the word that people in Iran, whether it's the politicians, the military, the people on the streets, they do not use that word to describe it. There's a completely negative kind of attitude to any form of speaking with the Americans, and that's very natural given the result that this had, 2 rounds of talking with the Americans during this administration, never mind the previous ones that we had these negotiations, and ultimately they didn't result in anything positive for the Iranians. So this time around, I think people have learned their lessons, and they know that talking with the Americans is not going to bring anything positive for us.
So Ellen, just to clarify there, you do not think any negotiations will take place? I mean, they're talking about having talks in Pakistan, aren't they?
At this stage, no, absolutely not.
So, Ross, what's your reading of what Ellen has just said and what Donald Trump was saying yesterday, and the cloud of mystery over what he was saying without any backing, it seems?
Yeah, Nick, I mean, it's hard to know at this point. I mean, there have been talks about 2 figures that would meet together. That would be the head of the Majlis or the parliament, Speaker of the Parliament, Ghalibaf, and J.D. Vance. I mean, I certainly echo the comment that there's very little trust. Now, talks do not require trust, because at this stage, each of the parties need to trust their position, their deterrence or their capability more than the other. But at some point, they're going to have to move to some kind of conversation. But my hunch is that it's going to start more back channel first with mediation before there would be any kind of substantive talks between the 2 parties, given the history of attacks just following talks.
And that's the thing, isn't it, Ellen? At some point, there does have to be a negotiation. It just can't carry on in this way, can it?
Well, I think the point here is that Iran has realized that imposing reality on the ground is more beneficial for us rather than talking to reach some form of deal or agreement or whatever, because that will not have any form of guarantees. As I said, we have this experience with the JCPOA, which is a formally signed and agreed upon deal between different sides, not just Iran and the US, also the Europeans. So we have experienced many different forms of talking with the Americans. And I think what's happening right now is that practically some of the sanctions that were imposed on Iran's oil practically are being removed because of the military maneuvers that Iran has had in the Strait of Hormuz. So I think right now Iranians are much more focused on the outcome of the military operations that we're going to have.
Okay, and that's what you mean. Sorry to jump in, Ellen. Is that what you mean by imposing the reality on the ground?
Yes, of course, that could be part of it. That could be part of it. Demonstrating your power and your will to use it, rather than just, talking about, we don't want to start a war, because that was Iran's approach during all this time. Even, even during the 12-day war, Iran was very much restrained in its response to the aggression on our country. But this time, I think the red lines have changed a lot, and Iran is realizing that, this is something, practically, this is translating to more, more guaranteed ways of ensuring our security. I just wanted to add this, that in Iran, many people are speculating that all this talk of negotiations itself might be a kind of an introduction for the Americans to somehow, start a kind of a ground invasion and, try to, confuse the Iranians and then start a kind of
let's put that to Ross.
Invasion somehow.
Let's put that to Ross, because we were talking about this yesterday, weren't we? That another option is the fact that Trump is just buying time, and all that time the troops get nearer and nearer. We've got 2,500 coming from Japan. They're very close now.
Right.
Another group have left California, I think, and they're some weeks away, but nonetheless they're coming.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't discount the possibility that this could be some kind of a ruse in preparation, buying some time for a ground peace here. It's not clear what kind of effect that ground invasion or ground game would create. But I do think one of the questions that I think the Iranians are probably have to struggle with is at what point have they made their point? You know, if in fact, one of the things that I think has been said, I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, is that Iran has two basic objectives coming out of this war. One is the regime survives. That's the objective, number one. Number two, they've recreated deterrence. So I think there is a risk of Iran overplaying its hand. So at some point, the question is, have they made their point yet? If it's not just about punishment, it's about actually inflicting enough pain that brings the United States to the negotiating table, then I think there's going to have to be some movement on the Iranian side as well. However, I think if there's a concern that this is not a real negotiation, this is just buying time again, and unfortunately that is the history of the United States and Iran over the last year or so, then the Iranian position is going to be just to hold tight. So I think if in fact there is some kind of clear picture towards a diplomatic track, the Iranians are going to have to decide at what point have they made their point, and do they at least realize they have to go down the escalation ladder.
Okay, Ross. Well, let's put that to Elam. So at what point have the Iranians made their point? And indeed, that risk of overplaying their hand, because there is great potential for that, isn't there? In many ways, you could look at this and say that Iran have quite a strong hand at this moment in time.
Yeah. Well, we are not the ones who are, losing our stockpile of missile interceptors. So I think militarily, Iran still feels that it has the strength and it has the weaponry to keep the fight going on for a long time. On the other hand, I think that the idea that we have so many military bases in the region that they make attacking Iran, not just like in a situation like this when we have complete warfare, but also other situations when, the Israelis, the Americans, they just decide that they can come and assassinate certain people and then go back, and then there's going to be no repercussion. I think that's something that the Iranians feel that even if we have a kind of a ceasefire or deal or something like that, this is going to happen again. So making sure that these bases, these military bases that America has all around us in this region, for either the countries that are hosting them come to this conclusion that they do not want to continue this cooperation with the Americans, or even technically these bases are not able to provide the logistics for the American military to carry out these attacks. I think these are this might be a kind of a very broad description. Militarily, I think maybe military experts have to explain what exactly that means to, in what situation can we say that this has been reached. But I think the whole idea here is that we are not going to go back. Iranians are not going to go back to the situation in which, you wake up one day and then you see that your country has been attacked, either, as I said, like a kind of a complete warfare like what we are in right now, or even when you have certain scientists or military officials or politicians assassinated in cold blood, whilst you are not in a situation of war.
Okay,
so I think,
Ellen,
and also we have the issue of the sanctions as well. That's also something that's very important to the Iranians.
Okay, understood. We just need to move it on a little bit. So if Elam's point of view is reflected in that of the leadership, we're at a very dangerous juncture, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, listen, all sides put out a certain amount of bravado, a certain amount of, and I think on the Iranian side, obviously there's some anger, right, because they've been attacked. And we don't know really what kind of decision-making structure is taking place in Iran. I think up to this point, the behavior they've had has been pattern behavior. But at some point, I mean, the concern I would have if from the Iranian perspective is if the Saudis and the Emiratis join the fight, then you have a completely different playbook occurring, and could change the situation on the ground for the Iranians. So I think at some point they know they can't win militarily. They're going to have to make a point about reestablishing the deterrence, and there has to be some kind of diplomatic threat. They cannot, and getting U.S. bases out of the region, highly unlikely. In fact, I would say at this point that's off the table.
All right.
A strategic rethink of the framework of security, because as the Qataris have identified that there were shortcomings in how these countries were defended against incoming Iranian attacks. There's the talk of the town now is what is happening between Donald Trump and Iran. According to the Qatari Foreign Ministry, they're not involved in this. They welcome the idea of a de-escalation. They welcome the idea of talks and are ready to provide any assistance. But so far, this is not a Qatari, there's no Qatari involvement in this rapprochement or talks between Donald Trump and Iran. So all eyes still on what is going to be happening in the next few days and hours on how Iran continues to fight what it sees as retaliation on its soil by Israel and the United States. And these countries are waiting with bated breath, strengthening their security postures to deal with any kind of threat that comes towards them. It appears that the Qataris are welcoming it. There's a resumption of schools and offices in the next few days in this country, but they say that they're still vigilant and they're monitoring what comes next.